Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Tonight, we turn our attention to U.S. South Korea trade relations with a specific focus on the semiconductor sector. As both nations prepare for the upcoming 2+2 trade talks, key industries such as the automotive, steel, and semiconductor sectors are set to take center stage. With rising tariffs, trade imbalances, and increasing geopolitical tensions, South Korea's semiconductor industry faces critical challenges. With the U.S. looking to expand local production, how should South Korea respond to ensure its semiconductor sector remains competitive in the global market? And what steps should companies take to navigate these uncertain times? To explore on this, we connect to Sung-Soo Eric Kim, founder and CEO of DataCrunch Global and adjunct professor at Yonsei Graduate School of Business. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me tonight.
And also joining us is William Brown, a former member of the board of directors at the Korea Economic Institute of America and the principal of NIE.com. Great to have you.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to be here.
Let's start our discussion first with Professor Kim. So, like I've said, the upcoming 2+2 trade talks are expected to address issues on tariffs on automobile and steel products and semiconductors as well. How likely do you think it is that South Korea will be able to negotiate a reduction or a removal of these tariffs, specifically in the semiconductor area?
I think that we are trying to negotiate with the Trump administration at a very difficult time. We have an upcoming election, and we do not have a formal leader to discuss these kind of very important economic cooperation with Trump. So I think the best strategy that Korea should take is to defer any kind of tariff imposing policies of U.S. until the new administration is inaugurated in Korea, and we have time to sit down and think about how to respond to the United States. However, meanwhile, we have to extend our clear message that we want to avoid the tariff in return of a stronger economic cooperation with the United States. I think that message should be delivered really clear in this visit.
Right, so reassuring strong cooperation and alliance with the U.S. would be crucial. Now, with the U.S. seeking to expand its local production in key sectors like semiconductors, what kind of incentives or proposals do you think South Korea will present during these talks to ensure its own semiconductor industry remains competitive and also benefits from the negotiations, Professor Brown?
Yeah, you know, it's quite interesting. A lot of this tariff or trade action trouble began, in my view, with the bipartisan act, what we call the CHIPS Act, CHIPS Act, in 2022, in which the U.S. launched into a new area of industrial policy, of helping build in this case, semiconductor plants in the United States. Korea, especially Samsung, would immediately jump to take advantage and did very well with it. They got I think it's about a $6 billion grant to build a plant in Tyler, Texas. And that plant is well underway now. It was supposed to be finished by now. It's not quite. I would argue, but then interestingly, they sort of slowed down, I think because of lack of demand for semiconductors in 2023, 2024. Now, ironically, so the Trump administration was, and a lot of Americans did not like this idea of giving grants to industry companies. But now it seems to me like these tariffs may actually save the planet because they're raising the price of semiconductors coming into the U.S., so it'll help the domestic production. So I would suggest that the Korean side really take advantage of this plant, this big, huge new plant, advertise it saying, you know, this is a great feature and that the Trump administration is actually helping with it by having some tariffs on foreign production.
Right. So taking into consideration Samsung's latest plant investment in the U.S. would be helpful. So given that South Korea is about to experience a political transition, like we've mentioned, Professor Kim, how should the current government actually approach these trade talks to secure the best outcome for the semiconductor industry, especially considering the next administration may have different priorities?
So the strategy of the Trump administration is not having an exchange one-on-one on industry by industry. Trump administration's strategy is to have a negotiation among industries or even between economic discussions and security discussions. So I think we should maintain a strategy to discuss apple to apple. When it comes to semiconductor industry, we have to understand that U.S. also will be greatly hit if they impose a tariff on the semiconductor industry because our chips are used for Apple iPhones and all the computing devices and are the basis for the AI development of the United States. So that's a scenario that both of the governments do not want to proceed, honestly speaking. But in order to negotiate other sectors, Trump administration is using a card for the semiconductor industry to discuss further with Korea. So I think our best strategy is to discuss still in the tech, this dialogue, so that Korea can also participate in the Stargate program and other initiatives that U.S. is driving for their future AI development, and delivering a message that Korea wants to be a strong economic and technology partner in those kind of AI strategies and policies. However, the problem is that our, election is coming up, so we cannot guarantee anything right now. And Trump administration also knows that Korea cannot guarantee anything at this stage. So I think the discussion should be very normative and just setting the base boundaries of what we discuss and how we continue the discussion. Just setting the rules of how we discuss should be the goal of this visit, in my opinion.
Right. So it really is a tricky situation for South Korea. Trade talks often take months, and having a shift in leadership at this time could really affect negotiations as well. So it's really important to keep the negotiations within its category. Now, on top of the tariffs, Professor Brown, the U.S. has indicated it will impose tariffs on South Korean semiconductors. What potential effects do you foresee this having on the South Korean economy, and what kind of steps do you think South Korean companies could take to adjust to these changes?
Now, Korea has developed quite a dependency of the economy on semiconductors, but it's also very in a dominating position with DRAMs. And I mean, Samsung has done an amazing job, as well as Hynix and others. So I think the impact of tariffs, the interesting thing about tariffs is that they impact differently different countries depending on the rates. So that Korea has actually had an advantage the last few years with the free trade agreement with no tariffs. Now they'll probably get some tariffs. I can't imagine that they're really going to go up to this maximum level, but they will no doubt have some tariff on them. The thing is, other countries, other providers, Taiwan especially, will also have the same tariff. So in the sense that all the prices rise, Korea is not that badly disadvantaged, I don't think. So I don't think it's that much trouble for the Korean economy generally. Now, it may be some trouble for Korean companies, semiconductor companies, if overall demand, world demand for semiconductors drops. But there's not a real good sense that that's going to happen. In fact, Korean semiconductor exports to the U.S. rose in April so far. Now that may be temporary development.
Right. So impact and damages would likely not be that much of a huge deal for South Korean firms. It could, but what about on Professor Kim's side? Considering the growing uncertainty around global trade, how should South Korean semiconductors companies adapt their production strategies now to avoid the impact of these tariffs and maintain their competitive edge?
So we have to understand why Trump is trying to impose a tariff on the semiconductor industry specifically. This policy is not, Trump's administration's policy only. During the Biden administration, the first priority of the United States was to secure the semiconductor supply chain so that U.S. can continue the leadership in AI initiatives and the tech industry. So this strategy will continue regardless of which administration U.S. will have in the future. So in that line, I think Korea should really strengthen partnerships globally among the supply chain to ensure that Korea is not alone in this discussion with the United States. So I think that should be the first priority. Second, as a Korean standpoint, Samsung and SK is a global company. So of course, we would like to manufacture semiconductors in the Korean territory, but as a company itself, as a Korean economy itself, it does not really severely impact our country of where we manufacture semiconductors. So that means that we can also consider further geographical diversification, considering North America and other regions to mitigate the risk of tariffs and supply chain risk when this kind of policy will emerge in the future as well. So we have to understand this will be an ongoing situation and this will be the new norm. So we make sure that we geographically diversify manufacturing and also strengthen our bargaining power against other countries by strengthening the global supply chain in the semiconductor industry.
Right. So maintaining flexibility in terms of geographical areas of manufacturing, and also expanding partnerships would be key in this context. Now, the semiconductor industry actually plays a crucial role in both the U.S. and South Korean economies. Bill, in your opinion, how important is it for South Korea to maintain strong ties with major American tech companies like Intel, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, particularly given the rising geopolitical tensions at this point?
Yeah, it's just really quite amazing looking at the semiconductor industry, how entangled it all is. It's very hard to put a country name on something or even a company name on something. Samsung, example is cell phones, smartphones. So I've long had a Galaxy Samsung cell phone. My daughter has an Apple. Well, which is made where? Is it American? Which is American? Which is what? It's just very hard to tell. The Apple is actually more Chinese than the Samsung, and the Samsung is actually more American than it is Korean. More value added with American chips than Korean chips. They all have a little bit of Taiwan chips. It's just a very entangled industry, very complex one. It's very interesting. It makes a magical product, right? So I just bought a Motorola. I was thinking I was going to be a good American, cashed in my Galaxy. Well, the Motorola is Chinese. Motorola is owned by Lenovo, and it's assembled in Vietnam. So the amazing thing here is how entangled it all is. And I think the Korean side should work that to its advantage with these tariffs and saying, how on earth can we tariff one and not the other? You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt us. Who are you? What are you trying to do? So I think now It's different for cars. Cars, I think, is a big trouble for Korea, tariffs on cars. But for the semiconductors, I think I'm a little less, if I were a Korean side, I would be a little less worried about semiconductors.
Well, Bill, thank you for the clear-cut explanation with your examples.
Well,
Right, so it is indeed a very complex issue with a lot of countries, having putting in input in one product. Now, President Trump has actually expressed interest in tying U.S. military cost-sharing arrangements to the trade negotiations, as Professor Kim has touched upon a while ago. Could you tell us about the risks that you see in linking these national security concerns directly to trade talks, particularly in terms of the semiconductor sector?
So I think that we first have to understand why Trump wants the semiconductor industry to, move their factories to the United States. Because let's say that there's a risk in Korea or in Taiwan. If there's a risk in this geographical area in Asia, then U.S. economy stops. We already experienced that during COVID when the global supply chain of semiconductors were disrupted. The automobile industry slowed down. They could not manufacture automobiles because we did not have semiconductors properly being supplied to the automobile industry. Also, other tech sectors will stop. So this is a scenario where the United States does not want to foresee in the future. So that's the reason why U.S. is constantly demanding Korea and Taiwan to move their factories to the United States. However, I think it's not our best strategy to tie the semiconductor discussion with the military discussion, because as I said in the beginning of this interview, I said that I really emphasize that the principles of negotiation should be apple to apple, industry to industry. If you start to mix cards between industries or even between economic discussions and security discussions, then it becomes a really complicated math that we have to solve between the United States and Korea. So we have to, I think, continuously, get into a discussion that we will secure the economic partnership in the semiconductor sector so that we can also cooperate with future AI developments and technological co-initiatives with United States. I think the discussion, again, should be apple to apple, industry to industry.
Right, apple to apple. That would be very important. Now, let's also touch upon the trade war between Washington and Beijing. Given the ongoing political and economic pressure surrounding U.S. and China, Professor Brown, how should South Korea strategically navigate these negotiations to avoid being caught in the middle of the two superpowers, especially when it comes to its semiconductor exports to both countries?
Yeah, I play a lot of tennis, and we always say in the middle is the wrong place to be, in the middle of the court. We call it, in reality, though, often you want to start in the middle, and if you make a good shot, you come up. If you make a bad shot, you go back to defense. I would argue a little bit the same for Korean industry, playing with U.S. and China. That be agile, be ready to go move back and forth. This is actually a huge advantage, I think, of U.S. industry. U.S. industry is very agile, moving back and forth for such a big country. Taiwan is also, Hong Kong, Singapore. But Japan and Korea have tended to be kind of very conservative, not moving very well. And I would argue, and I think it's a function of their sort of oligopoly, even monopolistic competition inside the two countries, Japan and Korea. So I would argue Korean industry is a problem because it's so oligopolistic, lack of internal competition. So I would argue Korea should be working hard to have more internal competition, maybe even with foreign companies, so that it can be more agile dealing with both U.S. and China. But in the long term, the easy answer is don't move to Beijing. Beijing, think of your car industry, what the Chinese properly did with their own industry. They built their own industry of cars using foreign technology. But as a result, Korea no longer exports cars to China. And if you're not careful, they'll be exporting cars like crazy into Korea and devastate your car industry. So I think the evidence is pretty clear. You need to side with the Western side, the market side, and be very wary of Chinese, what we call state capitalism there.
Right. So being caught between, two superpowers, it's like you said, it's never easy.
Not the right place to be.
Right. So it would be crucial for South Korea to, carefully diversify its markets while also ensuring strong ties with the U.S. for a long-term success. So we'll really have to wait and see how that develops in the near future. So, yeah, but as of now, we actually will have to wrap up our program for tonight. Thank you so much for your insights and your time, Professor Brown and Professor Kim. We appreciate it.
No,
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.